So I'm going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us from the Villanova School of Business graduate programs. And today's topic is ramping up your network with professional organizations. So we have a panel discussion today of 3 professionals that will be sharing their personal experiences with professional organizations in the framework of building your network, thinking about opportunities. And then we have some questions prepared, and then I would ask you please to, again, mute your volume today and share your video if you're willing. Again, that might pop up on today's recording, but just for full disclosure. So with that, again, greetings from the Villanova School of Business. I'm going to jump into our content. All right, so I know many of you and my colleague Lauren Knoll is also on today. In our coaching conversations, we talk a lot about networking. So one of the main ways that we say is a vehicle for that is really through professional organizations. So I just posted a few here to kind of give you an idea of, again, what's out there in the region across all different industries, across all different backgrounds, from the Philly Ag Club to the Young Professionals Council, the Chamber that you'll hear a little bit about later, to our SHRM group for the HR professionals, as well as PSPS in terms of talent and some HR functionalities, to the PICPA. So when Lauren and I often are coaching students and talking more about these outlets, we think about a couple high-level things that, again, you'll get more details about. But they include things like additional access to a network of folks that are also invested in the industry that you might already be in or that you might want to pivot to, but also about some job leads. So thinking about really building a network of like-minded professionals, you may get a leg up in terms of new opportunities coming down the pike. And then just thought leadership. I think a big aspect of being part of a professional association, one, allows you to better understand trends and changes and disruptions potentially within industries, but also it's demonstrating externally in terms of that external brand, really to convey to through LinkedIn or through your resume, through your involvement, that you have a direct engagement with this industry, that you have a commitment to pursue a career. So I think it has a lot to do with branding, access, thought leadership. So there's so many great value adds of becoming very engaged in a professional association that is related to the organization, industry, function of what you want to move forward to and you might want to jump into. Because we do often talk to folks about that career transition piece and about pivoting in one's career. So with that, I just wanted to give an overview in terms of what we recommend, but I am going to start to turn things over to our panelists today. So we're going to kick things off with one of our MBA alum, Elaine Gallagher. And Elaine, you are on.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Elaine Gallagher. And as Rita said, yes, I'm a Villanova School of Business alum from a couple years ago. So I currently work as an R&D engineer at PICO, where I manage our engagements and research industry groups with the hopes of identifying projects and improvements we can make in order to improve our operations at PICO. My background's in chemical engineering, and I'll be talking mostly today about my involvement with our young professionals group at PICO, as well as my involvement with the YPC, the Young Professionals Council that Rita mentioned, through the Chamber of Commerce. I'd also say my hobbies here are what I normally would do, but I guess now it's a lot of coloring and walking around my block.
Thank you, Elaine. We're going to jump to our next panelist. So Brian, welcome.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Thanks for asking me to do this. I'm a Villanova Business School class of 1991 undergrad, and since then I've been in the investment industry for pretty much my whole career, in varying degrees, either sell side, fixed income, or more buy-side investment management. And I'm going to be focusing today on the CFA Society of Philadelphia. That's a by far the most impactful professional organization I've ever been part of. I'm currently serving as the president of the Philadelphia chapter. We have about 2,200 members many of which, but not all, have the Chartered Financial Analyst designation. And I'll be sharing what I had, kind of sort of what I've gotten out of the organization, and sort of some strategies that might be able to help you guys plug into whichever networks that are important to you.
Great, thank you, Brian. And our last panelist for today, Tanya, thank you for joining us. And I know you have a couple professional organizations, but the PSPS being your primary focus today.
Yes, thank you. And thanks so much again for having me. I am in a role leading our HR operations function for a mid-sized specialty chemical company out of Wilmington, Delaware called Elaines. So my career, I've primarily been, it's straight HR business partnering generalist, and then this HR operations role for working on 19 years. Time flies. I am not a Villanova alum, but I am closely connected to Villanova through PSPS because Villanova partners incredibly well with us in sponsorship capacities, and we work very closely together. So from a background standpoint, I'll be speaking a lot about PSPS and my involvement in that organization. And then I also recently, within the last about 6 months or so, joined the alumni board of the school which I graduated from when I was at Penn State University, and have been connecting with students very closely on programming and resume tips, career tips. So this aligns very, very well, and I'm excited to be part of the conversation today.
Great, thank you so much. So I just wanted to give everybody a grounding of who our panelists were today, but really the primary focus of today's conversation was to get their feedback and thoughts about engaging with professional organizations and more or less best practices. So I'm gonna start just jumping into some of the questions I had and we discussed together as a panel. So I'm going to facilitate the handoffs a little bit, just for a virtual panel. Could be a little more tricky than sometimes just being in person. So the real first question I had for all of you, and I'll go from Tanya to Brian to Elaine, was what made you get involved?
It's a great question. For me, it was really about rebuilding a professional network. So in my former employer, I had lived out of state for a number of years. I'd lived outside of Chicago for about 8 years. And coming back into Pennsylvania and coming into the Philly metro area, I wanted to get connected locally and really build on the HR professional network. So for me, it was really an opportunity to meet like-minded peers and also those with different thoughts and perspectives and ideas that could help me professionally think differently about my career, about the way I was facing and dealing with business problems, and just also that community and affiliation of those dealing and facing with the same business challenges that you see. So it was, professionally a very good move for me at the time, and really helped me kind of reground in my home state and build an alliance of both professional and in some cases personal friendships as well.
All right, Brian, we're gonna hand that over to you next.
Sure, thanks. A similar story to Tanya's, I think, with the exception that I actually moved out of my home state to Philadelphia about 13 years ago. So I started my career, I grew up outside of Boston, and I worked in Boston for about 8 or 9 years before moving down to Philadelphia, because about 13 or 14 years ago. And when I moved down here, I noticed right away that I didn't feel anchored, professionally. I didn't feel like, I didn't really know the firms, I didn't know the people. And in Boston, it was such a compact little financial district that you could walk down the street and see a former coworker every day, and I missed that. And I had just gotten my CFA charter, and I desperately wanted to sort of like rebuild that feeling that I had from Boston, which was, a sense of familiarity, a sense of connectivity. So I reached out to a coworker that was on the board of the CFA Society of Philadelphia and said, this is my motivations, this is what I want to do. And they said, okay, let's let's get you going. So I started off as a volunteer, and I'll talk about sort of how to sort of infiltrate these networks, and volunteers is a great way to do it. But yeah, I wanted to rebuild sort of a sense of connection and familiarity in a new city.
Great. So Elaine, tell us, I know you were recently a student of ours. What made you get involved, and especially on the board of the YPC?
Sure. So I first started getting involved. My biggest involvement right now is I run our young professionals group at PICO. And how I got involved in that is realizing, when I first started working there, I really enjoyed the work and I liked the people I was working with. There just wasn't really anyone else I was meeting who was in a similar place in life. So once I started getting involved with the young professionals group, I met other people, not just my age, but just with more similar interests, who were trying to develop their careers in different ways than the people in my immediate office. Then that led me to the YPC, the chamber group, through DYP. So once I started to meet more people through our young professionals group at PICO, I realized that PICO had a connection to the chamber group, which is how I got involved there. And that it's been great over the last, I guess 4 or 5 years I've been involved, meeting other people, not just, I guess, outside my immediate industry in a similar place in life. And then about a year or two, I started getting more involved and realized that from my experience at PICO, I had value to provide to the chamber group, which has been great. So over the last year or so, I've been involved with the YPC board, which has been just really nice to be a little more involved there.
Thank you. So I was hoping everyone could expand a little bit on your roles within the organizations in terms of maybe the tasks, especially, Brian, what that role particularly means in terms of the oversight of the organization. So more or less, walk us through a little bit about what roles you have now or maybe have had for the professional organizations that you want to speak about. I know a couple of you have multiple ones that you may want to share. And then really the value.
Okay, sure. Let's see. So the role I'm in now is the president of the board of directors, the board basically. So we have about 16 people on our board, and we've had sort of functional duties cut off across. And the way my sort of succession went was a volunteer. Then there was an opening in the board that I ran for, and I was on the board for about 10 years. And ultimately, we have like 1-year terms for the president. Actually, I'm going to stay on for 2 years for sort of interesting reasons. For the first time, we're actually switching to 2-year terms. But we need a sort of a pretty big pipeline of people that are willing to take the helm, because of so much, that sort of structured turnover in the president's role. But my job, we have a full-time executive director that runs the day-to-day, runs our programming, and I basically oversee the board and oversee him. So that's my role, and ultimately what I'm trying to do whenever I enter into a project or a conversation or a board meeting, is my job is to make sure that the voice of the member, remains heard, and make sure that we're delivering member value, particularly in times like this where we can't, connect in ways we all traditionally got used to connecting. So, the key for us, and I think any professional organization, our MO is to make sure our members are getting value from associating with us. And those needs and changes evolve over time too. So the key is to try to figure out what it is through surveys and through just getting out and talking to people about what they want.
Great, thank you. So Tanya, tell us about some of the roles you've had or the value you found in getting really involved with some of these groups.
Absolutely. So I think the key thing is getting involved in any type of professional organization. Sign up for a committee as soon as you can. I think that is the best way, is just immerse yourself into it. Find something that you are passionate about, or you think that you can either learn something new or that your skills really lend well to that particular committee or area, and get involved. And when I joined PSPS, that's what I did, was I jumped on a committee for our leadership forum, which is our signature event of the year annually. And From there, I was able to move into a role co-chairing our programming. I did that for a few years with a fantastic partner, and we worked to essentially develop and help shape what programming we would offer professionally to the organization and our membership, and really listening to and understanding what do our members need across the Philadelphia area, what type of things are cutting edge, what are the new trends that are emerging in HR space, and then what do our members need from a standpoint of both small businesses, consultancies, and large companies, because our memberships cross a variety of different industries and sizes. So it was really looking at those areas, and I feel that that role really helped me in understanding what value a professional organization adds and what it gives to their membership. And then very recently, as of January 1, I have moved into the VP of Finance role for PSPS. So I'm a part of the executive committee, essentially now making decisions and evaluating and looking at the future of the organization, ensuring financially the solvency and the key decisions around our financials, and then partnering with our VP of Programming and our presidency and president on how we shape the organization moving forward. So it's exciting, very interesting times right now, obviously. And to Brian's point, we're also very closely looking at and thinking and continuing to evolve in how we best support our members during this time. Then from the Penn State perspective, I very recently jumped on the alumni programming group, which is our alumni programming board. And in that role, I'll be part of a group that ultimately looks at how do we help students that are in the School of Labor and Employment Relations program. How do we provide both course curriculum, working with the faculty, and then also partner with the career services and student services to help the undergraduate and graduate students get the best and the most out of their program, and help them from a professional development and career advice perspective. That is incredibly gratifying for me. In particular, I leveraged a lot of those services when I was a student, so I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be able to give back in that way.
Great, thank you. Elaine, if you want to jump in.
Sure thing. So with the Young Professionals group at PICO, I first started getting involved just by volunteering to help with a single event. I was a little nervous to sign on for too much at first, but after helping with that first event, then I ended up joining the board and then became the secretary, and then I'm now sort of finishing out my second year as the president. And that's been great. Just that little bite of a time helped me learn more about the organization and has let me be a more effective leader, I believe, now because of that exposure over the last several years. With the Chambers group, similar. I first started just going to more events, then I joined a committee, and have now been on the board for the last year. So what we do as the board is we'll look at the events more at a higher level. So the committees will look at all the individual events and their efficacy, try to collect new ideas, but then the board will look at how those events did in terms of attendance this year compared to last year, and look to identify any gaps in programming or how the Young Professionals group could engage more with the chamber, again, with the overall goal of increasing engagement and strengthening the community of young professionals in Philadelphia.
Great, thank you. So my next question has to do a little bit more with our title of the program today about ramping up your network. So I was wondering if you could share with us how your involvement in these professional groups has really enhanced your professional and maybe even personal network, and maybe share an anecdote or just a story about how on a personal level, professional level, you've gotten some traction from your involvement. So I'll start with Tanya, go to Elaine, then Brian.
This is a great question for me. Most people are surprised when they learn that I'm naturally an introvert. I really am. And I think that being part of professional organizations has allowed me to become more comfortable on a personal level with networking, with the value of networking and really building those genuine connections. I think it's taken a number of years, but I think it's really kind of made me more naturally comfortable in those professional social networking environments. And for me, it's just been a tremendous opportunity to share ideas and perspectives with with other HR and business professionals in the community. And I think also for me, it's been really gratifying just to be able to give back, particularly with PSPS in the Philadelphia area. We're known as a very welcoming organization and have a reputation for offering really fantastic programs and also networking capabilities for our members. And I think those areas where we continue to add value, it's just really gratifying for me to be part of that. And I have gained so much professionally, and I think I alluded to a little bit in the intro, both, you know, the professional colleague connections along with some personal friendships that I've made along the way. So it's been really powerful for me.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll just go down the line. So Brian, tell us about the networking vehicle that you've experienced and maybe just broadly about the CFA Society.
Sure. Yeah, so I started off my talk about sort of saying what my MO was for joining, and I can say, you know, looking back, I've gotten, you know, everything I could hope for from the organization and then some. Opportunities I've had recently as president is I've been lucky enough to represent our society in some global events. So I was at the annual Leadership Council in London about 2 months ago, and you know, able to meet a whole group of people that I would never have otherwise come across, you know, in a million years. You know, having, you know, working in, you know, through the Philly, Boston, New York corridor, that's been incredibly valuable. The one thing I've seen in the past, and Tanya used the word introvert, and I was thinking about that before the panel. I think it's important that there's some roles, either certainly in the investment business and certainly in others too, but like if you're like a securities analyst or a financial analyst, it oftentimes it's sort of an individual sport. And if you're an introvert and you have that type of role, it's very easy to sort of like come in every day, get locked in your spreadsheets, and your world is, you know, what you need to be to bang it out of the park every day. And you can be very successful in that role and doing that if it's the right, you know, fit, and that's what is expected of you. But ultimately something bad is going to happen. Something bad is going to happen. It's going to be either a merger, or the company's going to cut back, or you're going to get a new boss that you can't stand. Whatever it is, something's going to happen, and then you poke your head up and you see, okay, what should I do next, or what's my next move? And it's too late then to network, or at least it's a lot harder to network. So if you're building that along the way, you're building sort of a safety net for yourself, you know, and that if something were to happen with your job or your role, you know, you have people to turn to, fairly quickly, that know you intimately and can maybe give you a leg up in opportunities.
Great. Elaine?
So as I've been reflecting on my engagement in these different organizations, I've increasingly realized that they're a good place to try something that's out of your comfort zone or to fail safely. So one of the organizations I'm involved in, kind of like Tanya, I'm involved with my undergrad's local alumni group. So one of the things I've done with them is call accepted students. And I do not like talking to people I do not know on the phone. It makes me super uncomfortable, but it's been something I've volunteered to do over the last several years because I realized that there's growth in that discomfort. So that's one example. Then also in terms of the failing safely, in a lot of our industries, I imagine there's not a lot of space to do that, but these networking groups are a really good place to do that. So I've run a number of events over the last several years with our young professionals group at PICO, and not all of them have gone perfectly, and that's okay. I've had some public speaking experiences where I knew it was outside of my comfort zone. It doesn't necessarily go perfectly well, but I knew it was a good experience for me. So that's been the biggest thing I'm thinking about as I've been reflecting on my experience and some of my professional growth. I'd also say that my efficacy in my current job has definitely been heightened by my personal network within my organization through my involvement in some of those internal groups. And then actually my next job, which I'm moving to a new job in about a month, also at PICO. But I was able to learn more about that role and learn about the qualities that were with those internal organizations.
Great. So I think we heard a lot of great takeaways from sort of like developing some internal sponsorship. I heard a little bit from you, Elaine, and like some access points, but also just the thought of building out some opportunities to get a little more stretch opportunities to maybe build a competency that you don't use day to day in your role, and just to have that safety net of professionals should things happen that are unexpected, especially in today's conversation and things happening in the economy right now. That's very appropriate to just be thoughtful. Having a built-in network can be really helpful as we think about some of the disruptions in terms of the economy with COVID. So thank you. So my next question actually has to do with making time. So working a lot with our part-time MBA students, I know I hear I'm balancing school, a full-time job, sometimes family obligations, personal interests. So how do I find the time, or how do I see the ROI in committing to a professional organization? So talk to us a little bit about what your advice is in making time and how you balance everything. So I'm going to start with Brian, and then I'll kind of jump in and hand that off.
Making time. So, I mean, the first leg into, a professional network is typically raising your hand to volunteer for something, or even just even before that, just going to an event or two. And how do you make time? I don't know. We all have our own different sort of sets of circumstances, whether you're married, if you have kids, or if you're single. But I found that a lot happens after hours, in business. It's not just 9 to 5. It's what happens afterwards. And I don't just mean, happy hours, things like that, but it's, some kind of event where people are getting together. There's almost always something going on, professionally that occurs after hours. And I think you sort of treat it as almost like part of your job, to sort of do that, occasionally or periodically, whatever can fit into your, the other priorities that you have in your life. And we've been kind of lucky with our society in that we sort of overstaff. We recognize that we're all volunteers and that things happen. Like I've had plenty of instances myself and some of my fellow board members where, someone would be a really high level contributor for a couple of years, and then they kind of like have to drift away because something's going on in their life. Either a new job, they're traveling more, whatever it is. And we sort of recognize that. And I think a well-run professional network or society, so recognizes that this is not any one person's number one priority, right? Their number one priority is their job, their family, whatever, and this is volunteer, and they should get in the practice of overstaffing for things, recognizing that other things are going to come up in people's lives, that is going to take them out of the game temporarily or sometimes permanently. So. Yeah, I think it's just treat it as part of your job. It's no different than working late, once or twice a week, rather than spending it in your office. Go to a industry event.
Tanya, I'll have you jump in on that same question. Thought about just making time and the ROI there.
I think it's really finding an organization that kind of speaks to you in terms of what you're looking to gain and then where you can best contribute. And I think it's making that a priority within the construct of everything that Brian talked about, the personal commitments that you have, whether it be friends, family, other activities, work, all of that has to factor in. But I think really finding the group or groups that most personally you connect with, and then it doesn't really feel as much like work or an add-on. It feels like something that you want to be part of and partake in, and you find the way to make the time for it. And for me, I mean, I live by my calendar. I'm a very I'm a very task-oriented scheduler naturally, so I just make things work in terms of trying to prioritize. But I will say one of my early mistakes was when I was exploring a lot of different professional organizations. I probably stretched myself too thin and got involved in too many things all at once, and then ultimately had to narrow over time and determine and decide which areas were the most important to me, which ones I had the best connection with. And then also I have a small child, he'll be 5 this weekend, and I needed to look at as a priority, where can I fit in and contribute to the organizations that I'm part of in a meaningful way, while not taking away from the importance of my family life. So I think it really is understanding where your priorities are, and then making decisions around the professional organizations that best align with those priorities. And then schedule. I live by my calendar. I live by my task list. So.
Thank you. Elaine, I'm going to throw kind of a new question at you. And we think about, one thing I mentioned, and I think I've heard everybody speak to a degree, is how professional organizations can be helpful to you in terms of that professional brand. So we talk a lot about defining a brand and thinking about your LinkedIn profile and your resume. So maybe if you can give us any thoughts, has it come up in an interview? You said you're switching roles. How does your involvement maybe come up on that professional branding side, or even through an interview process, or when you're having conversations about your own career development?
Sure. So one of the, best benefits is that a lot of job descriptions or a lot of job requirements will look for supervisory experience. And sometimes it's difficult to get that first supervisory job, to get that experience to be able to apply for positions that might be higher in the organization. So the professional development groups are a really good way to get that experience without being in a formal supervisory role. But I'm probably guilty of not cultivating my brand as tightly as I should, but I'll also say through my leadership in these organizations, I'm definitely conscious that it's helped put me in a better light to be seen as a strong candidate for a future managerial position, which is something I desire.
Great. Tanya, if you can maybe speak to it and even think about how you perhaps think about potential, like on the talent side, about folks involved. Is there some kind of halo effect to a degree, because there's some intangible qualities or competencies from being involved? So from your own personal brand perspective, but maybe thinking about folks building out that talent.
Well, and certainly in the HR profession, we're always looking for individuals that jump in and take on new tasks, try something new, step outside of their comfort zone. So I think that is, to Elaine's point, it's part of the, that failing, but a safe way to fail, and really trying new things and stretching yourself beyond your capabilities or what you thought your capabilities were into something more. For me, I do think having the professional associations and being part of membership and leadership roles in professional organizations, I do think, to Eileen's point, it gives you experiences that you wouldn't have elsewhere that do translate into that supervisory experience. Or perhaps you are starting in an individual contributor role in your career and you don't have the opportunity to manage a budget, but maybe you join a professional organization and that's your first foray into looking at a balance sheet or managing budgets. And those type of activities and assignments really do translate well into building upon your career. So I can't stress enough, I think, the value of expanding yourself beyond your comfort zone and really highlighting those things when you're building out your resume, when you're building out your LinkedIn profile, and frankly, using them in job interviews. It's very common, and I've interviewed in my career a number of individuals just graduating from their undergrad program or master's programs, and we know as HR professionals that many of you won't have those supervisory experiences or those budgetary experiences, but if you can talk to some of the things that you've done with student governments, with sororities, fraternities, professional charity organization, those experiences go a long way and really do translate into that leadership that companies are looking to see.
Thank you. So Brian, I have a different question that I don't think we really covered yet, is that sometimes through professional organizations, there's some access points for certifications. I think the CFA obviously is a good example of that, of how involvement in pursuing a certification through a professional organization gives you a lot of industry credibility. So if you could kind of speak to that, and I know that's not across the board, but that's something that I feel like stands out for your organization.
Sure. Yeah, the notion of halo effect and personal branding is an enormous part of why I stay involved with this CFA Society. I, from a personal brand perspective, hope people associate me very, very tightly with the CFA Institute. Frankly, I'm lucky enough to have an organization that I would want to be that much linked to. So it's something that I actively cultivate through conversations I have, through LinkedIn activity, making sure people know that this is part of what I do. Running the Philadelphia Society. There's definitely credentialing is an interesting world. It's definitely getting to a point where if obviously it's very functionally critical as well, but if you want to get into the investment management world, or even in some cases the corporate finance world, the chartered financial analyst designation is very highly regarded, and everyone in the investment business either got it or actively didn't get it. And they didn't get it because it was too hard and it just takes too much effort to do it. So either way, when you're having a conversation or an interview or just a networking event, you're with someone that knows the credential, either because they chose to do it, and in that case, you're sort of like foxhole friends with them because you went through it, or someone that actively didn't do it, and they have whether they say it or not, I think they have respect for you for having endured something that they didn't want to endure. So I think that's a huge part of this. And even if you're part of a network that's not that doesn't have credentialing, investing your time in a meaningful way over the course of years, where you can start to really feel like you're part of the organization. It's okay to sort of like step into that by participation and volunteering, and then maybe a leadership position in some kind. But the more you invest in it, the more I think credibility you have when you're seeking to associate yourself with it. If you just are an attendee, it's good to, I think, promote the fact that you're active in some way with a society. But as you get deeper and deeper into it, you can sort of embrace it a little bit more as sort of part of your portfolio of skills and network. So, and I think it's incredibly important.
Great, thank you. So I think my last question before I turn it over to some of our audience questions today is just maybe if you had to like encapsulate your biggest takeaway in like a few words of what the involvement has meant to you, that would be great, just to kind of wrap up this more formal component of my questions. So Elaine, I'll kind of toss it to you. If you had to like really kind of that piece of advice or tidbit or nugget that what has this done for you to share with the group?
I guess I'd say maybe my experience is a little bit different because a lot of it's internal. But my participation in our young professionals group at PICO has really enriched my experience, and it's made me a lot more appreciative, or I guess a lot happier at work. It's also let me meet a lot of my closest friends. So I guess my takeaway for folks, I mean, if you have some sort of, if you have strong internal organizations that you haven't gotten involved with before, I'd really encourage you to take a look. And then if that's not doing it for you, but I've also really enjoyed the YPC group, the Chamber of Commerce one, has really, I guess, heightened my appreciation of working in Philadelphia because I've gotten to meet so many other interesting people in a similar place in life in the city.
Great, thank you. Tanya?
I think for me, the most important thing is the ability to pay it forward. I've really valued being able to be so connected to people in a way that hopefully gives back and makes their professional career or their schooling more rewarding for them. I think that's really powerful, and I love that opportunity. I think also just the opportunity to experience things beyond what I had done in the past, so really stretching myself and pushing myself, and then also just the connections that I've made along the way have been the most powerful aspects for me.
So Brian, we'll end with you with this kind of like holistic idea of how this has been meaningful for you, this involvement.
Sure. My involvement with the CFA Institute keeps me connected with not just people, but with a higher purpose. And I think it's something that's very hard to grasp if you're in a particular role or within a company. You're part of something bigger. And just this morning, for example, we had a global town hall with the CEO of the CFA Institute talking about what we're doing about COVID. About we're delaying our tests from June to December, which is the first time that's happened in ever. And also all kinds of other things, budgetary concerns, things of that nature. And as I'm listening to her talk about sort of the relevance of the CFA charter and the power behind it, and she used the words like people respect it, and she called it convening power, which means if the CFA Institute has the ability to convene very, very great minds to either speak at events or engage in meaningful discussions with a regulator or something like that. And it's because of the neutrality that we bring. It's because of the multi-stakeholder nature of the CFA charter. And it's really the only investment industry lens that is truly focused solely on investor outcomes and neutrality and fairness in markets. So it keeps me at a level that it's very, very easy to get unanchored to if you're focusing on your day-to-day tasks or even the organization of your company. There's something much bigger going on, and a networking society or association like that really helps you sort of stay at that elevated purpose.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to see if anyone, I know we have a couple folks from our specialized master's program in finance with us, some of our MBAs, 1 or 2 alums. So I was wondering, I know I have Adam on here and Sasha, if anyone has some questions for our panelists today. Let's see. All right, well, I'm gonna throw a couple prompts at you. So Adam, you've been joining us for these virtual programs. I see your face, so it's so nice to see you. What questions do you have? Since we have a few professionals here, you could kind of get a little, garner some advice. If you want to jump on your audio.
I'm still thinking through, some of the things we discussed, so you can come back to me in a little bit. I don't have anything presently.
Okay. Let's see, we have Daniel here. Daniel, do you have any questions?
Sure. So one quick question I was kind of wondering is for the, I guess the certified programs that you guys have, or specifically the CFA, is there like a lot of people that show up to these different events who actually don't have the full CFA designation yet and are kind of either on the path or thinking about it?
Yeah, great question, and absolutely there is. So it's one of the little known facts that we try to get out, particularly with our university outreach, that you can be a member of the CFA Society of Philadelphia without being a charter holder. It's an affiliate membership, and it gets you, most, if not all, of the member benefits, including attending events. You get membership pricing on our bigger events that we charge for, things of that, and access to the job board, things like that. So yeah, absolutely, there's a path in if you don't have it yet, or you're thinking about doing it.
Cool, thanks.
Great. Well, Janelle, I know you're on here as an alumnus, thinking through. You've been involved in some groups. Do you have any thoughts or questions you want to present to our panelists today?
Just a thought. I'd like to share. I have been attending quite a few virtual sessions, given I've been able to be a little bit more flexible with my work schedule. And what I found is I've gotten a whole lot from attending virtual sessions with those in my industry. And I think now is a great time to, even if you're not having in-person events, which I personally think are way better for networking and actually getting to know people. But as far as just kind of going through best practices and understanding what's going on in your industry, I think those professional groups are great at this specific time.
Great, thank you. Actually, maybe our speakers could jump in, as I'm sure there's conversations as we have had, Lauren and I, about, reframing our programming to offer some additional virtual connectivity points. So I guess if you wanted to jump in, maybe Tanya, I'll start with you. Has there been conversations? Are there plans to move some of your programming or some of kind of your connection points to a virtual model?
Yes, absolutely. So we have our quarterly program for April is moved to a virtual format, and we have some within PSPS. We have some smaller groups, our special interest groups, and our local area networks, which are becoming in a virtual capacity as well, and really moving into that format. And I think what's really important, and to the point raised, it's keeping people connected and keeping people engaged and feeling like they're part of a community. And I think that's the really meaningful and powerful thing about being involved in professional organizations, is feeling that sense of community. And even though we'd all love to be in a room with each other and see each other and sit and have that cup of coffee together, Zoom is working for us right now, and it at least enables us to be able to share ideas, thoughts, see each other's face, hear each other's voices, and stay connected. And then also just stay top of mind with what's relevant in this new landscape with COVID. In an HR and business environment right now, we're looking at the ever-changing dynamics of what does the workplace look like now, and what are the regulatory changes, and things are moving so quickly that having the ability to learn in these virtual environments is really, it's just such a great opportunity right now.
Great. So Brian, I'll kind of throw that same question about conversations or things you have in the works for virtual offerings.
Yeah, similar story. We've made all of our events either virtual, or we postponed them till the end of the year, and we're still trying to work through sort of what that's going to look like in the near term, just like everybody else. But we're sort of like taking it quarter by quarter, and assuming that we're not going to be able to get together in any formal way for a little while. We had an event recently that was virtual, and as you might imagine, there was even more people going virtually than there were in person. So I think there was sort of like some pent up demand about virtual events even before this happened. But I think a lot of people didn't want to be the first mover because they didn't want to sound sort of impersonal or like. But I think the cat's out of the bag, or the genie's out of the bottle, however you want to say it, and people are recognizing that this is a pretty good way to connect. And not to say live is going to go away forever, certainly not. But I think its level of acceptance in society and the business world, just went through the roof over the last couple of months. So now it's not off-putting, to say, hey, I can't fly to Boston, for our meeting. Can we do it via Zoom? If you did that 2 years ago, someone would be like, if it was really important, you'd make the flight up here and we do it in person. You know what I mean? And now it's sort of like it's a gesture that represents a meaningful connection without being in the same room as somebody. So.
Well, I know, Elaine, I saw an update from the YPC that you had a virtual event coming up. So maybe you can just speak to like the decision. And I know there's probably discussions. We have them all the time at Villanova, what platforms work best. So there's kind of like new conversations happening. So I guess give us a little insight for those board discussions.
Sure. So similar to Brian's comments there, I think there was some pent-up demand. We had started talking about this, I guess, back in January or so, around increasing our virtual workshops and that sort of thing, even before it needed to be a thing. So I think we had one last week that I think sold out, and there's another one next week. So for the folks on the call, if you're interested, take a look. I think they should be available, maybe for a small fee if you're not a member, but should have some space in them still. So I'm excited to see that. I heard good things about the one that we had last week. I wasn't able to attend, but I'm signed up for the one next week. I think the tricky thing is trying to figure out what topics are most, I guess, of interest at this time. I know internally we're moving some of our young professionals content to virtual, and some of the topics we had queued up aren't quite as pressing or aren't maybe the right thing right now. So I think that's been the trickiest thing, but it's been really good. I'm excited to see what we come up with. We actually have a meeting later today after, to talk about for the chamber what sort of other events we'll do. Professional development for sure, but we'll have to see if we can come up with any creative networking or volunteer events as well.
Thank you. So I did get one or two things through the chat. So one question that came up was kind of back to the idea of the vetting process. So maybe Tanya, you could jump in first here. How do you not spread yourself too thin? Maybe when you went through that process to figure out which group meshed better with some of your objectives, like how did you decide? What were some of your maybe decision-making points to find the PSPS worked best for you opposed to SHRM or maybe some other groups?
I think for me, it was really what the programs offered. So what was I learning going to the programs? Where did I feel the strongest connection with other members and the ability to network with them? And then also schedule was an important component for me, just based on family life and work responsibilities as well. And I think be realistic with yourself also. If you live 40 miles outside of a city, you're likely not going to participate in events that are in that city unless they are in a virtual offering. So being realistic with how much you can dedicate toward the actual commuting to events when we're in a position to commute to events again, clearly. But I think that for me, it was really looking at the content offerings, what was I getting from them, where I felt the most connection with the other members, and where I could kind of stretch myself within my own professional career. But I would also say leverage the network that you have, get recommendations from other people. I got involved in PSPS because a former professional colleague that I still stay connected with, she had invited me to an event as her guest. She was a member and said, why don't you come with me and check this out? And so I think there's a power in also leveraging your current contacts and networks, whether it's professors, other fellow students, or those that you've been involved with in internships or other types of capacities. Get recommendations and really get feedback from others, and then just spend some time exploring on your own.
Great, thank you. I think that answers the question. There's a question just about maybe some additional recommendations for professional associations, especially on the MBA lens. So I know Lauren might jump in here after myself, actually, but I like the YPC Elaine is a member of for the chamber, because I think it gives you access across industries, and it's to me more of a macro offering about different topics that kind of lends itself no matter what your job function, and you might build a network more regionally opposed to industry specific. So I kind of like that as a balance to finding out what you're really interested in cultivating in terms of that industry network. So kind of having a balance of something like a YPC for more of a broad-based network, but also something that might be more in the purview of industry you're pursuing. But Lauren, I'll let you jump in and see if you have other suggestions.
Sure, absolutely. And I agree with you, Rita. I know for me, I've had that same experience. I've enjoyed being a part of YPC. Elaine, I actually just signed up for that event, so I'm looking forward to the virtual event because it's just a nice way to connect with young professionals across industries. But then in my own career coaching life, I'm a member of certain industry groups, and that's really helpful when you think about career advancement best practices. So there's a balance there. I think if those of you are still exploring or you're newer considering a career pivot, even just leveraging the Villanova Alumni Network, do informational interviews, talk to people who are working in the industry you're targeting and get their advice, similar to what Tanya was saying. A colleague invited me to this. Same for some of the organizations I'm a part of. I never would have known about them if a colleague or coworker hadn't shared that information with me. So I think also connecting to people in an industry can be really useful to figure out what's going to make sense for you.
Yeah, so I think with that, we're actually out of time. So that went by so quickly. I really wanted to thank our panelists. Thank you, Tanya, Brian, and Elaine for giving us, the thoughtfulness, the panel process, you checking in yesterday with us, you being thoughtful about the questions, you being willing to share your thoughts through recording and be videoed, and all that great stuff. So, thank you from Villanova for that commitment of sharing your time and goodwill with us and great advice. And also, if anyone's looking for additional virtual connectivity points, a little bit more on the casual end, we have a discussion tonight with Trevor Hayward, one of the founders of Evil Genius Brewery locally. So he's going to be doing, instead of a fireside chat, a Zoom side chat with us at 7 o'clock. And we're doing an IPA taste testing with some insights, and that is next Thursday. So just to keep things continuing on, if you're looking for more virtual programs, we're trying to keep offering them. And always our extended community is welcome to join us. So thank you again and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.